We are just 5 weeks away from elections here in the Commonwealth. It is your vote, your voice, and in the city of Portsmouth, there is a race going on for the Commonwealth's attorney position. There are 3 candidates who are vying for your vote in that seat. And today we have one of those candidates who is joining us here in live Impact News. We're talking with Steve Heretick, who is here in the room with us. Thank you so much for joining us here in our studio.
Good morning, Eugene.
So I got to ask you, I mean, you have quite the background, and people who live in Portsmouth probably already familiar with you because of previous elected office that you served, and then also you have a big legal background as well. Can you tell those who may not know a little bit about your experience that you bring into the table?
Sure, and I appreciate you having me on. I know this is a slow news day with the hurricanes and the government shutdown, but anyway, this is an important election for our community. And let me just tell you why. You know, certainly in Portsmouth, there's a reputation that Portsmouth may be not the safest place in Virginia to live right now. And I think a lot of that is not because of our police department, but things fall apart in our Commonwealth Attorney's office when it comes to trial. You know, I've been a lawyer for 35 years. I came out working in the Justice Department in Philadelphia. And I learned, you know, I ran a department in DOJ in the criminal division. And I was a supervisory attorney when I hired into a law firm down here in Hampton Roads. And, you know, I've tried cases both state and federal level. I've done everything short of the Supreme Court of the United States. And, you know, it's been my career, and I enjoy doing it. I think I'm a decent litigator. But I can also tell you that having served the Portsmouth community both in City Council and in the General Assembly, you know, there's a lot more to the job of Commonwealth Attorney than just showing up in court. And, you know, one of the things that we've seen over the past few years is that our current Commonwealth Attorney been there for 10 years. She doesn't come to court. She's got a revolving door in her office. And unfortunately, their handling of cases has frustrated judges, jurors, neighbors. You know, it's a mess. And I had a lot of people come to me this year, you know, and say, Steve, you know, would you consider, you know, coming up and running again? I mean, you served as City Council, got that. You served in the General Assembly, got that too. You know, but we need somebody that not only can find their way to a courtroom and win, but also can work with local government, can work with state government, can work with law enforcement at the state and federal level. And I got all that experience. So I think that's what brings me to this. And I think that, you know, one of these things that my dad raised me to be sensitive to is in any community, you give back the best you can. You know, you do, you know, what you can for your neighbors. And, you know, at the same time, you know, you bring your family along and you help protect them as well. And I think that's really what brings me to this. And like I said, it's an important election this year for us. It's not just, I mean, I think we get lost in the governor's races and all of the stuff that's going on with that. But I think for the Portsmouth community particularly, this is the first opportunity in a very long time for our community to kind of get straight on what our future is going to look like in terms of criminal justice.
You mentioned your time in City Council, also obviously a former delegate as well. Yeah. How do you think that those experiences will play into the role as the Portsmouth Commonwealth Attorney? Well,
again, not just being a trial lawyer, but, you know, a Commonwealth Attorney has to be able to interact with state and local law enforcement, Virginia State Police, U.S. Attorney's Office, FBI, DEA. I've done all that. But more importantly, or as importantly, I should say, the Commonwealth Attorney has to manage a budget. I mean, has to run an office, has to run essentially a law firm. And having worked with the City Council for the years that I did, I mean, you know, I became very, very familiar with local budgeting. When I went to the General Assembly, among other things, I was chair of the House Subcommittee on State Taxation. I know what the state budget looks like. You know, and I know that, you know, it's not just a matter of, you know, showing up at the office and hiring some attorneys and going to court. You've got to be able to budget for these things. You've got to be able to plan for these things. And those are experiences that I think I can put on the table uniquely.
You mentioned crime.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a huge topic of conversation anytime that I speak to people who are in the city of Portsmouth.
Right.
You know, obviously you would have a big role in that if elected as the next Commonwealth Attorney within that area. What specifically would you do? Obviously prosecuting, but is there any other programs or anything else that you're thinking of that you could participate in or that you would lead that would help to reduce crime in the city of Portsmouth?
Well, obviously, I think the job of the Commonwealth Attorney is to actually lead that office in court, and that's one of the things we just don't see. I have judges in every level of court to tell us that, you know, they haven't seen the Commonwealth Attorney in their courtroom in 10 years. Okay, so that's a problem. But more than that, it's more than just locking people up and throwing away the key. It's really trying to work up programs for diversion, for example. We have drug courts. We have mental health courts here in Norfolk, for example. We have veteran courts around the state. And I've worked with all of these things when I was in the General Assembly in the House Courts of Justice Committee. And I'm aware that there are other programs, other diversion programs that can help address the problems of crime short of incarceration, because really incarceration isn't an answer to much except getting those people off the streets and keeping them there. So I think that it's important as a community that we recognize those programs and the Commonwealth Attorney takes the lead in not only the courtroom, but in trying to make sure that criminal offenders are dealt with appropriately, but not overly so. In other words, it's not about locking everybody up and throwing away the key. If addiction is a problem, let's deal with addiction. If hunger is a problem, let's deal with that. If homelessness is a problem, let's deal with that. Let's deal with criminal justice at the lowest possible level rather than the highest.
When it comes to prosecuting, when we look at the various level of cases that you would take into, are there any other top priorities that you would go into? How will you organize the cases that you look at?
Well, I have to tell you, Eugene, I think the bigger problem is how do you reorganize the office? The Commonwealth Attorney's Office right now in Portsmouth is really at half strength. It has positions that are simply unfilled. And there's no accounting for that, except I hear from a number of people who used to work for that office, who now work for other Commonwealth Attorney's office, who work for the Attorney General's office. They'd like to come back, but certainly not under this Commonwealth Attorney. And I happen to know that the Attorney General, who I served with, Jason Miyares, in the House, has come down to Portsmouth to offer his personal assistance and his assistance to that office as well, and that's been rejected too. So I think the first job that any Commonwealth Attorney coming into that office has is to rebuild that office, is to regain the public trust that office can actually do the job it's meant to do. And I think so it's going to be a rebuilding process. Once that happens, though, and once we get the caliber of attorneys back that we need to address these crimes, then we can stand shoulder to shoulder with the Commonwealth Attorney's offices like in Chesapeake and Norfolk and Virginia Beach that do this every day without problems, that don't make the headlines that we do, that can really, Portsmouth can be four square in terms of its priorities in criminal justice. And that's what I think the initial job is going to be.
So in the process of doing that, as you're wanting to build up your staff, right, there's still only so much workload that you can imagine could take on. How do you prioritize which cases that you prosecute and move forward?
As a prosecutor, as a former federal prosecutor, I will step into the courtroom with the most serious crimes. Okay, and by the way, I will also take the day-to-day as well, because I think that, being a leader in any office, you have to do whatever needs to be done. So it's not only the day-to-day arraignment docket, which is, fairly straightforward. It's also, the advanced crimes. It's the preliminary hearings. It's the things where up to now cases have really fallen apart. And it's making sure that you're in the courtrooms with your staff. I was in a court case not long ago where you had a young assistant Commonwealth attorney who the judge said, you haven't talked to your witnesses. You don't know how to examine expert witnesses, which is basic stuff. And to me, that's the kind of experience where, any young attorney, you need an older attorney standing with you to kind of show you those ropes, because I can promise you don't learn that in law school all that much. All right, so you need to be there with your folks. You need to be showing them the ropes just like you learned it yourself, and that's what I plan to do.
What's your thought process on plea agreements?
They're necessary. I can't say, I do criminal cases all over Virginia, and certainly plea agreements, plea negotiations are part and parcel of just about every case everywhere. It doesn't mean that you have to agree, and certainly it doesn't mean that you're throwing things away. But I can tell you that there was a case, I got a transcript from an individual just yesterday, where it was a gentleman charged with rape 2 weeks ago. And he gets to trial, day of trial, the defense counsel makes a motion to dismiss the cases because the Commonwealth had misdrafted the indictment language, basic stuff. So the court had to throw the rape cases out, and they made a plea agreement to let this guy out on probation for a year with anger management. So he walked in the courtroom looking at multiple years in prison for rape. He walks out on probation with anger management, followed by his victim. And I can tell you what that feels like to a victim, because she was very clear about the impact it's had on her life and will continue to do. So plea agreements are necessary, but you don't give away the farm in that process. You make the punishment fit the crime to some extent. And, in that mix, you analyze your evidence, your witnesses, what you've got to put on the table, both in terms of the prosecution and the defense. And that's really what makes the process work. But I can tell you that in Portsmouth right now, I had an attorney stop me at a 4th of July picnic, and he said, Steve, you'd make a great Commonwealth attorney, but here's the problem. I represent murder cases, and I don't want to have to work really hard because I can walk in now and win because I know there are going to be problems that allow me to avoid trial. I can plead these things down to almost nothing, and I've done that. So, in a weird way, I'm going to make other attorneys work harder to get to the same place if that's what really happens. I want to put cases in the hands of juries and judges, not in the hands of defense attorneys, because it's the process that makes it work. It's the adversarial process. I put my case on, you put your case on, let a jury, let a judge decide. And that's how the process is supposed to work.
You've already alluded to it a little bit throughout your responses, but pinpoint for people who are going to be watching this, who are listening right now. You have an incumbent who's in, and you've been, critical, even in this interview of her. The various ways you would say you were distinguished from her and how you will handle the role.
Number one, I show up. I've tried cases for 35 years, and I have the distinction, not that a lot of people understand what this is, but I have a professional peer review distinction of AV preeminent. Less than 3% of all attorneys have this. You don't get that by buying it. Other attorneys, judges, they have to weigh in, and you get this rating from an independent rating agency. That's what I do primarily. I'm a first-chair trial lawyer. She doesn't try cases, and those cases she does try are very selective. And frankly, often she sits second chair, although as the head of the office, she takes the title. So number one, I'm gonna be in the courtroom. Number two, I'm gonna be leading my staff. And number three, I'm gonna be leading those programs which I think are gonna be most beneficial to the community in terms of deterring crime, number one, and addressing crime if deterrence is not really available. I think it's just being present right now that'll make a lot of difference to not only Portsmouth's criminal justice system as such, but in the image that Portsmouth has as a crime oriented city. And I hate to say this, but I saw a recent poll that said Portsmouth is the second most crime-ridden city in Virginia after Petersburg, which is not a distinction that anybody where I live wants to have. I can change that.
You mentioned how you've had a lot of people walking up to you who have asked you to take on this role. Can you expound on some of the things that they've said to you that they believe that you can do?
Eugene, it's the very same things that I've just discussed. I've had, judges, I've had, city leaders, city council members, mayors, former mayors, people I've worked with, people who've seen me in court, other lawyers saying, look, Steve, you've got the skill set to do this. You've been around, you not only can you try cases and do them well, you understand what's up on appeal. You've appealed cases. You've argued in the Virginia Court of Appeals, the Virginia Supreme Court. You've done that well. You've argued in the Federal Court of Appeals. You understand what's at issue here. But more importantly, when it comes to the nuts and bolts of running that office, you also know how to run a budget. And government budgets aren't the same thing as civilian budgets. It relies upon politics. It relies upon relationships. It relies upon your ability to go to your local city council, to go to the General Assembly in Richmond, sometimes to go to Congress. You've done that. So I think a lot of people have come to me because I have that skill set, and they say, look, what is it? They say Einstein's definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Well, we need a different result. We need to stop the insanity, and you're the guy we think can do it.
When we talk about getting the right people on your team, getting more people, obviously that also, speaking of budgeting, takes funding.
Sure.
Do you think that you'd be able to work with the city to get that available for you at the Commonwealth Attorney's Office?
Eugene, there's no question about that. Again, I have a number of members of city council and city leadership, senior city leadership who've come to me. They've offered whatever assistance they can. We have the current Attorney General who I served with in the House, Jason Miyares, who's offered his assets, his resources to us. I served with Jay Jones, who's running for Attorney General. I served with him in the House as well. These are relationships that I have. These are guys I've served with. And I know that they will come to help us if the situation is correct and if my office is willing to accept that help. And believe me, we are.
Can you speak a little bit more about that relationship that you have with Jason Miyares and your history there, and particularly, when you think about how that could impact or how that relationship could play a part in what you do? Can you just speak a little bit more about it?
Absolutely. Jason and I were House freshmen together when we went into the General Assembly. So we started, basically from day one together. He was obviously on the other side of the aisle from me, but I always respected, he was very forthright. He was very forthcoming in his viewpoints. And certainly politically, we didn't always agree. But I think the one thing we always did agree on is we need to do whatever we can do to make Virginia safer, to make our streets safer, to make our neighborhoods safer. And we might have different ways of doing that, but I can tell you that as Attorney General, I've seen him do some very positive things, or at least attempt to, for cities like Portsmouth. Certainly it's worked in Petersburg. And I think Jason is very sensitive to, the needs of communities like ours. In the same way, Jay Jones came to the House, I think, 2 years after me. I knew his father extremely well. We were friends for many, many years before, Jay finished law school. So no matter who wins the Attorney General's race in the next, 5 weeks, I have that relationship. And certainly I know a lot of members of that office. For a time, I was president of the Virginia Board of Medicine. I dealt with the Attorney General's office extensively throughout the 12 years I was in the Board of Medicine. So, these are relationships that I have. It's not like learning from day one. It's basically hitting the ground running from the experience that I have.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was 2023 when BRS came down. I believe he had a meeting with Stephanie Morales, who is the incumbent now, and speaking on the ways in which they could collaborate at that time when it came to some cases. So I just wanted to kind of gauge your relationship with him in that. Talking about police, when it comes to prosecuting a case, a lot of that depends on the evidence that is built from police departments and the local authorities. How would you go about building those relationships between you and the police departments and collaborating so that you can secure convictions?
That's absolutely critical to the Commonwealth Attorney's job. And I can tell you that, Portsmouth seems to be unique in the Commonwealth in having, ongoing animosity between its office and the police department, which is kind of mind-boggling to me. Portsmouth's police department is certainly short. I think we're about 60 to 70 officers short right now, but I can tell you it's a real department. And we have, I think, a very skilled chief who's come up through the ranks in Portsmouth. We have officers who are extremely dedicated. They want to be there. They want to do the work. But I can also tell you that, when we have a Commonwealth attorney who is running on defund the police, which she is, that seems to be a little counterintuitive to their mission, and certainly seems to be a demoralization in terms of what they're attempting to do. And I can tell you that, the Commonwealth Attorney's Office often, if not in every case now, leaves the police department to prosecute its own misdemeanor cases because they just don't have the manpower to do it any longer. And you have police officers now in court standing up against attorneys, skilled attorneys, not knowing rules of evidence, not knowing a lot of the basic things that trial attorneys just take for granted on a given day. And they're losing cases as a result. I think it's a demoralization problem with the Portsmouth police. I think that they're doing the best job that they can. But I look at this, I look at the relationship between the Commonwealth Attorney's Office and the Portsmouth Police as a partnership, not a competition and not something to run against. And that's one of the fundamental changes in attitude that I would bring to the office.
When you're talking about gathering evidence, a lot of that is based upon witnesses, people who can speak to a crime or speak to an accusation. And I know I've spoken with other Commonwealth attorneys, and sometimes they're challenged in making sure witnesses can come forward or that they feel protected if they were to give their account. As a Commonwealth attorney, would you see similar concerns, or just in what you do now, talking with people, have you heard about similar concerns?
Absolutely.
And then what would you do to make sure that you can get people to actually testify in the state of a crime?
I think one of the problems that we see in Portsmouth is, as you point out, we have witnesses who just don't want to come. And let me tell you, if you know that you're testifying against, somebody that lives down the street from you, and, it falls apart, you're going to see them on the street, right? I had a case not long ago where I witnessed a case where preliminary hearing, assistant Commonwealth attorney was interviewing a woman whose ex-boyfriend had set her car on fire in the middle of the night, and not content with that, took the rest of the gasoline and set her house on fire with her in it with her 3 children. Okay? She had to escape out the back window with her 3 kids. Now, the Commonwealth attorney hadn't spoken to the victim before she walked into the courtroom. She had no idea what he was going to be asking her why. He then tried to interview the fire marshal and drew repeated sustained objections from the defense. Finally, in the middle of it, the judge had to stop it and say, "Sir, you're not prepared. I can't believe what I'm about to say, but I have to dismiss this case." So this guy, who almost burnt his ex-girlfriend's family alive, walks out of the courtroom behind her. Imagine what that does to her. And imagine what that does to everybody else in that courtroom who saw that. Okay? If you don't believe that this office can walk and chew gum at the same time, I guarantee you're not going to be in any hurry to run down there and testify, against someone, because you might see that person on the street before the day is over. And that's not going to be pretty. I think one of the things that we have to do to get witnesses to participate is to inspire confidence that the office will do its job, that it will do what it's there supposed to be doing. And only then will you see witnesses coming forward like we see in Virginia Beach, that we see in Norfolk. It takes courage. But part of that courage is having the confidence that that office is going to do the job it's meant to do, and making sure that when the case comes, it's heard by a jury, it's heard by a judge. It doesn't get thrown out because of some legal issue. And at that point, I think that's when we're going to see a turnaround, not only in the court's approach to the Commonwealth Attorney's Office and the police's relationship with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, but with the public's confidence that that office will actually do the job it's meant to do.
What about any particular resources? I know, speaking with Ramin Fadahi over at Norfolk, that's one thing that he's constantly speaking of. Can we get more resources maybe for witness protection, more for supporting witnesses? Is that something you also would advocate for if needed?
That is a great question. And again, I think that's where, having the relationships with the city council and knowing my way around a city budget comes to the fore. I think that's where having, my relationship with the state, with the AG's office, with the federal government, I think that's where those relationships come into place. We do need better assets to have, better victim witness protection. And we need to be able to have, the type of resources on the ground where people actually want to work with the office to work with victims. Because I can tell you, after a while, it's demoralizing not only to the police to be losing these cases because of, balls being fumbled in the end zone in a courtroom, but I think it's also demoralizing to the ancillary staff, the support staff that works with victims. If they see people just not being supported, they see these people walking out of there in the same danger they walked in, after a while you're going to want to do something else. I mean, that's just human nature. So again, I think that those types of resources, at the end of the day, it involves money, it involves, resources. And that's where you've got to have the ability to walk and chew gum at the same time, not only in a courtroom, but in those governmental bodies that have the purse strings.
All right, we got Steve Heretick, who is here running for Portsmouth Commonwealth's attorney. I want to go ahead and give you the floor. Anything else that you believe the people need to know about you as you are running for this position that distinguishes you, that should garner you their vote?
Listen, bottom line, and I'm not good at self-promotion. I mean, politics kind of doesn't do that for me. I believe in public service because it is, after all, service. My family lives in the same community that everybody else does. We hear the gunshots at night. We ourselves have been the victims of crime. So I understand what it feels like to be in those shoes. All right. I also understand as an attorney how we can help to address those issues. I think the one thing I bring to the table that my two opponents don't is the type of experience I have, not only as an attorney, but also in various other forms of government and in public service. I think I have a dedicated history that nobody else can match in that race. And I think I've earned the public trust in many, many years of public service, over 20 now. My hair was not always this color. But in terms of actually doing the job, I think that, certainly I have an established track record that they simply can't argue with. And that's what I put on the table, and that's what I hope to do.
Well, people can early vote right now. They can go out and cast their ballot in person, with, of course, Election Day being November 4th. Again, we got 3 people who are running for this seat that is currently held by incumbent Stephanie Morales there in Portsmouth. And we'll see what the voters decide here in about 5 weeks and who will be the next person to represent that office. Steve, we're definitely thankful that you came in.
Thanks for having me.
I'll have to check back in with you in late October when your William and Mary places against my Elon, Elon University. We're going to see what the battle's looking like.
I got lunch on that with you.
Tribe versus the Phoenix. All right.
Thanks, Eugene.
Thank you so much for coming on in.